Hello and welcome back to Parenting the Geeks. You're joining us for a first look video, really. Technically it's not a first look, I got this yesterday. This is a war transformed World War One on the Doggerland front. So if you've not heard about this, this is a weird war game for World War One. Unlike a lot of weird war games, we're not embracing steampunk, we're actually embracing sort of magic and folklore and mixing that with the World War One. I got this book yesterday, like I said. I had a quick look through it. I'm not going to show you everything in the book because I don't want to ruin it for anybody or the author, or, I think you should go and buy it maybe. I mean, my opinion on this after reading it is I quite like it. I've not played it yet. And I'm going to be making some forces in the next video. So stay tuned for that. But for this, we're just going to look at some of the things in the book. Some of the things I think you should know before you get started, some of the options you've got. Yeah, let's do that. So, this is an off-spray book, obviously, we've got it there. Got a little blurb on the back. So, the blurb on the back basically tells us in 1916, as the Great War raged, the moon fell from its orbit. More or not, that's how it happened. A giant asteroid called Summer's Isle slammed into the moon, knocking it off out of orbit, leaving a huge hole in the moon and then showering the Earth with bits of moon. So I don't think we're going to worry too much about the physics of this, but basically, as we know, the moon controls the tides, and in this case what happened was Doggerland, which was the ancient bridge between Britain and Europe, which flooded between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago, was then unflooded, and this great massive amount of land between all of Europe was opened up. This also unlocked all the ancient magic and folklore of the whole world, apparently. But in this book, we're just concentrating really on Britain, Germany, France, Russia, that region. There is some American forces in here as well, but it doesn't really go into what's happened to America too much. So there we go, that's a quick overview of what this is. Let's have a look inside. It is a nice book as far as presentation goes. I do like it. So I'm not going to read through this verbatim or anything like that. I'm just going to show you this quickly where the lore is. So as I said, the old gods return. And the old gods are basically, here we go, it's aspects of the lunar goddess and the horned god. So there are three aspects of the lunar goddess. There's the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So each of those is technically worshipped as a separate god in the game. And then there is the horned god. So ultimately you've got four magical factions in the game. They aren't linked to any particular nation. The nation you pick is separate, so you pick Britain, and for instance, and then you can pick the horned god, or you can pick the mother, and it works like that. You can pick Germany and the horned god. You're not stuck with picking a god that belongs to a nation, because they don't. Transformed geography. Ultimately, as well, rather than just being this massive sort of seabed with nothing on there, apart from wrecks and bones and whatever else is down there, life has returned to Doggerland at a magical rate. A lot of this is controlled by magic, not by physics, not by history, not by. So if you're into like being exact about anything, this probably isn't the game for you. This is a game totally about fantasy, but based on history. And up to 1916, everything in the world seems to have happened exactly as it happened in reality. Now, as soon as 1916 hits and the moon gets hit, everything changes, and we're now into fantasy. One of the nice things about this book, by the way, is the artwork. I love it. It's really evocative. All the way through it, there are these really nice pictures. They give you an idea of it's giving me an idea for making models and scenery as I'm going along. One of the things I do like on this one is the little emblems. I don't know if you're making that in the camera, that they've got on their helmets. It's really cool. And I want to see when I'm painting it if I can replicate some of that. So general principles, we will go through this bit. So we do dice, just like in a lot of games, we use dice. Let's have a look here. So have a look at the general principles of the game. This bit I will show you, because I think this is something you need to know before you decide whether you want to play this game. We have general sort of have fun, use dice, when things don't make sense, and dealing with disagreement, which is something which does happen a lot in competitive games. It doesn't really happen in the games I play because I only play for fun with people and play narratively. Items needed for play, also an important thing. So, dice, D3, D4, D6 and D10s. That's mainly what you're going to be using. Probably more D6s than anything else when I've been looking through it, but that's mainly what you need. You also need scatter dice. And if you don't know what a scatter dice is, it is literally a dice with arrows on. So yeah, I've got a few dice here actually. I don't have a D4 because they're all my D4s are locked into role-playing sets for D&D. But obviously we've seen a D6. If you don't know what a D6 is, maybe you don't play war games, but that's a D6. And that's also a D3 because you just count a 1 as a 2 as a 1, a 3 and a 4 as a 2, and a 5 and a 6 as a 3. So that's the easiest way to get a D3 as well. So literally you don't need a separate dice for a D3. You can just use a D6. So we have some D6s there. No D4s, but it's a little pyramid dice. And then we have a D10. It's a nice glowy one there that I just found in a box. Not sure where that belongs to. It does look like one of my D&D sets, but yeah. So that's D10. And then we have a directional dice, which is literally all these. And then also have hits on as well. So when you roll it, if you're trying to do a direction and you roll a hit, there's actually a little arrow on there as well. If you don't have one of those, you can literally just use a six-sided dice again. When you roll it, the one's actually here, so you just go in whatever direction the one is. So in this case, the one's pointing in this direction. If the one was pointing in that direction, you go in that direction. If the one was up or down, you'd class it as a hit. That's basically it. So you could just do it with D6s, a D4 and a D10, but whatever dice you've got. And you can usually find stuff like this online somewhere. This is a really old dice from like a really old, I think it's maybe like Space Marine or Epic. One of the very first sort of Games Workshop games. It might even be 2nd edition Warhammer. I can't remember. But these are just all sat in a big box that I've got. Next you'll need command tokens, which is just anything that you can count as a token. Another dice that you've got that looks particularly cool. A gem. Something might be useful, something like a bolt action dice maybe. It's just something that's a bit different that you know is not a D6 or not something you're going to use to roll. Anything. You could print some off, you could cut some out of a piece of paper, just write command on it and off you go. You can do whatever you like, but you just need some tokens to represent them. Templates. There are some templates at the back of the book that you can photocopy, but it uses a 3-inch diameter, a 4-inch diameter, and a 6-inch diameter template, as well as an arc template which goes out a bit like that. I can show you them at the end if I remember, and it's kind of like a flame sort of template, so pretty sort of standard fare. Models, there is no model range for this yet. I got this from North Star Games. They do a Great War range. They all look very nice. I haven't got in the Great War models. I'm actually going to be using some Atlantic Wargames models, which will be in the next video. Some Germans and some British. One will be in the next video. I'm not saying which one I'm going to do first. The rulebook, which is in front of you, yay, and a playing surface. Now, this does recommend 6x4, but it does also stipulate that you can play on any size playing surface. You may have to modify the scenarios for the surface that you're playing on, that's all I'm saying. Most of the scenarios seem to play it on 6x4 or 4x4, although one of them, I think the trench one's a bit smaller than that as well. So that's the kind of size you're looking at. My playing surface is either 3x3 or 4x4. I do have a nice 6x4 map, this will work for this, but it's just finding the room to play it. I normally like having a table set up for a while, I know, and it's really difficult, especially in a household where there's other people. I think, why have you got that set up all the time? But there we go. So that's basically what you need to play. Terrain, as it says here, obviously terrain. I'll be using a lot of the bolt action type terrain that are made for bolt action, so just trees, hills, roads. I imagine some people have maybe been making roads in Doggerland. It does say in the lore that there are trenches in Doggerland as well, but it sounds like they're quite far apart. So this game, sort of for a World War One game, doesn't just focus on trenches, but there are trenches in it, and there are scenarios that focus around a trench. So if you have trench terrain, perfect. You'll still be able to use that. If you don't worry. You don't have to use it. I would say you probably do need it to get the full benefit of everything out, because there are rules for trenches in this and everything. But you don't need it. It seems to be a very flexible way of looking at it, and it seems to just cover all bases. So use what you've got, really, and then that'd be my advice. Non-essential items, tarot cards. Don't have any tarot cards. Never owned a deck of tarot cards. There are some on No Star Games. I might buy them. I'll see how flush I feel. And just various counters for marking various conditions, etc. So again, gems or just a little piece of paper with something written on it. Actually, for the first few games, that's normally what I do. I just get an A4 piece of paper, and as I need something, just write command and then cut it off, and then there we go, there's a command, or there's a condition, or whatever. It's usually the easiest. And then later on, you can go and find some fancy printer and print some better ones off, or find some nice tokens you like. Or sometimes they even make the tokens eventually, like Sarissa has a lot of tokens for different games, not for this one, but they do look very nice. So collecting and modelling, it basically encourages you to use your imagination, which is great, and basically just use whatever models you've got. If you have no Great One models at all, like me, you are starting from scratch. Obviously, in the next videos I do, I'm trying to put it together the cheapest I possibly can. So stay tuned for that. But there are plenty of ranges out there. There's not as many as there is for World War II, and do struggle to get some vehicles as well. There are vehicles in this game as well. Because when I was reading the lore at the beginning, I was going to think there's not going to be any vehicles in this game, and I'm sure there should be. But you know, the fact that they're so far away from supply lines, I was surprised when I saw the vehicles. We'll get to that later. So key principles. And I'm just going to show you this diagram of the rules, because this is an example of the diagrams that are in the book. I think they're really well presented. This is just about unit cohesion, and it just tells you, you need to be within the 6-inch sort of template of each other. That's incorrect, and that's really incorrect. So you can't just line your troops up. In a lot of games, it would just be you have to be within 2 inches of another model, but this is an inch, and you have to be within an inch of the whole squad. One of the things I'm not too sure about is how this is going to work with different base sizes, which is about something I'm going to mention next. But I might just look at this as more like Star Wars Legion, where you have your leader and everyone else has to be within range, within that 6-inch block. So wherever your leader is kind of like the centre of the template, and everyone has to be within. That might be the best way to sort of view it. I don't know. I'm going to have to play the game and find out. Moving on. Bases, as I said. So, we have here, in order to try and make things fair, it's quite prescriptive about base sizes. One of the things I'm not too sure about how it's going to work, because I have a lot of models, and everyone has some model collections, and if I do want to use them, they might not be on these base size that I'm going to be using, and I'm not going to rebase them, so they'll just be whatever base size they are. But the idea is that you measure from the edge of the base when you're doing measuring, so that's why the base size is not. For me, I'm just going to measure from the centre of the base, and to hell with it, using logic. But in a tournament situation, this is what this is here for, to try and stop people taking advantage by modelling models that are hanging over their bases with massive guns or whatever. But if we all use logic, in fun and narrative games anyway, I try to. I would say just measure from the centre of the base, really. But for those who want to play tournament style, there is rules for bases in here. So if you want to play like really hardcore, fair enough, you can do it. Just be aware you might need to rebase models if you have them. But there we go. I'll show you the bases. Those are the base sizes. And I think that's important to actually tell everyone before getting into it. For vehicles especially, there is facing, so there's like firing arcs, and that pretty much covers everything I think we initially need to know. Just very quickly, this is what a unit profile looks like. There we go. And the first thing I noticed was obviously the this here, medium. What's this about? So just quickly, the unit's pace is speed. We have the name of the unit here. No prizes for that one. The cost of recruiting the unit. So that is your section points. SP is the cost for recruiting a unit. And then we have the unit's martial skill, which is what this MS button is, and that's either low, medium, or high, which is an interesting way to run the rules. I'm not going to go into that in this video. I will save that for when, if I do a playthrough, and that will depend on how much interest I have in the videos and how much time I've got, basically. But I'd love to do a playthrough of it, but I need to play it myself and then actually record it. We have zeal, we have the number of models in a unit. There we go. And then we have saving throw, and then we have keywords, infantry in this case, starting equipment. When I do the other videos, I'll probably just tell you what the starting equipment is. I'm not going to give stats out because, again, I think people, if they want to play this, should buy the book. But I think knowing what equipment a model has, you know, what is actually on a model, and how, if you're going to build something in advance, you know, oh, can I use this model? Well, these are this kind of equipment. I think that's stuff we do need to know before we get any investment into a game. And that is where I'm going to skip through the rules for now. It uses an interesting order system. Again, I am going to cover that in a playthrough if I do a playthrough. Love the artwork. Rules for movement. Skip, 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 skip. Again, kudos for the way it's laid out. I really like it. Love this piece of artwork, by the way. This crash plane looks excellent, and I really want to get a plane. I'm thinking of getting this Sarissa one because they do have. I'm sure they have a biplane on their web store. But I also like the idea of having like cloth that you can see like the ribs of the plane, like it's decayed a bit as well. But there we go. Sort of looking at doing that. Close combat section. And we have lots and lots of nice little tables. Shooting the connects. Skip, skip, skip. Rules that cover terrain, which we all want. Skills of ordering, and I'll just pause slightly. The stuff on rituals, which is what your witch is going to be doing. This is where the weirdness comes in, and thematic lodges. As I mentioned earlier, each one gets different abilities. This, for instance, is the maiden. We have the mother. We have the crone, and then we have the horned god. There. Then manifestations. So I don't really want to spend too long on this, but quickly just tell you, we have various levels of manifestations. These are creatures you can summon. They're not an exact creature. For instance, the Snatcher is suggested a kobold, a brownie, or any other small sprite sort of size creature. I do have some gremlins from Crooked Dice Games. I might use a gremlin because one of the things this does is sabotage stuff. So that's your smallest one. Then we have a Beguiler. So you're looking at like a Banshee or something like that. We have a Haunter. So we're looking at some sort of feral spirit there. Then we have a Prowler. So we're looking at some sort of beast, wolf type thing. A Devourer. So we're looking at something quite large, like a troll or something. And then finally with a Crusher. And we're looking at something like a giant for that, something really big. And obviously the bigger they are, the harder they are to summon. And when you summon them, they can seem to have quite a big effect on the game. And again, we'll cover that if we do a playthrough. And if you want to see a playthrough, put it in the comments, please. And give us a like and a subscribe as well. All the rules there for that. Rules for orders. And then we have some faction-specific stuff there as well. The rules section for vehicles. Skip through that. Right, creating a patrol. Very loosely, I should tell you to create a patrol. A patrol will consist of a captain and a witch who are free. You can purchase lieutenants, and then you can purchase infantry, cavalry, vehicles, and I've not really seen any way you can purchase creatures. Creatures seem to be added onto lists via manifestations. Although some of the lists you could argue that they are creatures, but yeah, that's for discussion later. So building a patrol. This is the interesting part. So we have line and mindless models. You can have as many of these as you like in your army. Line are like your basic core troops. Mindless, also basic and core, but really basic. And then the rest of your army will be made up of elites, cannonades, and uniques. Now, elites you can have equal amount of points, that's SP, section points, as you have line. Cannonade, you can have half as much as points that you've spent. So if you spent 10 points of line, you can spend 5 points on cannonade. And again, you have unique. This is kind of like your characters, like your lieutenants, that seem to be uniques. And you can spend, I think it's up to, so it's like, what does it say? It says 1 section per 3 section points spent online. So essentially, if you spend 10 points online, you could spend 10 points on elite. You could spend 5 points on cannonade, and you can spend 3 points on unique if you round up. And that is basically how you would choose your force. So again, this feels very sort of like one of the old ways of choosing 40k models or Warhammer models in the games I've played anyway. I remember the old way of doing that. It makes sense to try and balance out so you don't just have an army of elites. I will say line troops though, I was expecting tanks, this is British and German tanks, to maybe be cannonade, but they're line. Yeah, I'll just say that as well, because that was a surprise. She could technically have an army of tanks and a captain and a witch. Sounds cool to me. Only your captain and your witch would be stood outside the tank, so there we go. But technically you could do it, and perfectly legally. That's why I'm surprised they're not elites or cannonade, but no, they come through as line troops, which is odd because armoured cars come through as elites. And then you would basically choose your faction. As I said earlier, you would choose Hermetic Lodge. You then have your common units and your faction units. So there's a common list, and then there are faction specific lists. I am not going to spoil what's in those for people. I'd prefer it if people went and bought the book if they were interested in this. Support the author. I will say you can customise your captain. You give them the star sign. Each one of the star signs does something different. You can have your captain mounted on a couple of fantastical beasts as well. And then here is the captain. A very short preview of the entry for the captain. This is just the standard dude that you get for free. And that is basically his stats there and what he can have. And again, he can have some free changes and upgrades. Now, upgrades work different to section points. That's something that did confuse me when I was reading it. I'm thinking, oh, do I add the section point? Do I add the upgrades onto the section points, and then therefore my line units cost more, and therefore I can have more elites? No. You have section points, which are how you buy your army, and then you have an agreed amount with your opponent of upgrade points. So before you play, you need to agree. It specifies, it doesn't really specify, so it suggests between 25% and 50% of what your force is. So if you're fielding a 20-point force, you would say to your opponent, how about 10 points of upgrades? So you'd agree how many upgrades you're going to do. I think 50% works well. When I've been sort of plotting out some army lists, it's enough to give you some wiggle room and some interesting items you can play with. But when you're starting off, you may just want to say no upgrades and just see how the game plays, just to get used to it. And I think 50% works for me, because I like to have some weird stuff in there. And there is not just unit upgrades, but there are some like magical items at the back. Again, I'm not going to go into them, but they do cost upgrade points as well. So when you are plotting out your army, make sure if you want anything weird and wonderful, check the back, see if there's anything you like. But ultimately, we have the common units list. Line units, elite units of the German Empire. Yes. And they have their units. I will say I was quite surprised by the two first, because you can take a special character that replaces your captain in every list. There are two in the German army. And every other army list, I'm like, yeah, I definitely want this. But in the German one, I'm really stuck between two different types of army. I think it's important to choose that first, because it changes the entire theme of how I feel the army. It doesn't change what you can take. You can still take the same stuff. There's nothing here that says you can only take this if you take this. But I feel that the German two options, you've either got somebody who is basically doesn't like magic and is trying to focus on sort of like the machinery of war and supplies, so like a tactician, and someone who is the complete opposite and is a complete sort of magic user, sort of Illuminati-esque, secret society-esque. I don't know which to take because I like the sound of them both. So a lot of factions have special units. We did mention earlier there were tanks. The Germans can have the A7V tank. Again, I'm not going to show you it because I think if you're interested, buy the book. Honestly, it's definitely worth a look. If you're into war games, you're into weird war games, it's definitely worth a look. But yeah, I'm surprised that the tanks are line units, because you can just have an army of tanks, which is great. I'm not disappointed by that. I'm just surprised. So yeah, there's a couple of line unit options in there. Then we have elite unit options for the Germans. And then we're on to the British Empire. I'm going to show you this bit because this is a really cool piece of artwork. This sort of siren luring the soldier into the lake. It's great. So the British Empire, again, we have a couple of options for the captain. I will say there is a cunning person, and I think it's already been pretty widely released. There's a mesmerist that you can have as well. So if you want to replace the leader of your force with basically a cult leader, the mesmerist is the way to go. We have line units for them as well. We have tanks, nice tanks. We also have a unit I'm definitely going to take, but we'll save that for the next video, well, when I do the British video. And there we go. We have Free Corps. Now this, I will pause slightly on this because the other two might be a bit more self-explanatory. Free Corps is technically another German faction, but they have entirely embraced magic and weirdness and grim fairy tales and all sorts of things. They've completely lost the plot, in other words. But no, if you want a faction which is totally weird, it's completely different, doesn't really feel tank, doesn't really feel the kind of like machine gun-esque kind of stuff. Not that you can't feel the common items, but they have some very nice, unique items and some very interesting modelling. And if you like werewolves, I'll send them off. Anyway, you can replace your captain with a couple of choices again. One of them being, and we're a were creature. We have elite units, which are awesome, and then we have some more mindless units. If you wonder what a mindless unit is, and if you're also wondering if there's zombies in this, there kind of is and kind of isn't. That's what I'm going to say. There kind of is, and there kind of isn't. Just like there kind of is and there kind of isn't Nazis in this. But the latter one's pretty historically accurate. The former is kind of like there's a unit called the Harrod. You may have heard of that in some of the other things. It's essentially, it could be zombies if you want it to be zombies. If you don't want it to be zombies, you can make it into golems or walking men, scarecrow things, or I don't know, animated snowman if you're doing a Christmas themed army with a Krampus in it. I have considered that. But essentially, they could be zombies, but they could also just be people who've lost their minds by the hell of war, or been chemically induced, or one of the things I was thinking, like flesh golem, like Frankenstein, someone's been stitching them back together, that kind of thing. Or it can be literally something witchy, maybe like a wicker man type creature made out of twigs who's been animated by dark magic. Feel free to use your imagination, but you can definitely have zombies. They're just called Harrod. But there's not technically zombies in it, but there is. There we go. The next one is the American Volunteer Legion. So I will be doing one because I think it's cool. And we have a couple of obviously captain options in this. They're both interesting. I have ideas for both. We have elite units in this. We have no actual line units. Slightly disappointing because everyone else has an option for a different line unit. The Americans don't, which to me can make it, when I've been making the army list, it's got a bit boring. Because I don't want to have cultists in this list. So it's just infantry section. So I would have liked it if one of these had a line unit in, which was different and unique for the Americans. I don't know, maybe native scouts, or I don't know. Something that's American and liney, not OP, just to have some different flavour in the army. But what they do have is probably my favourite trench fighters in the game. They also have some really cool American themed units, and I would say if I can make an army, I'll be using all the different options that are in the faction bonus, including the cannonade unit they have. There we go. I'm being vague because I want you to go and buy the book. Russian Empire units. So I've been waving this past Claire's face. What do you think? What do you think? And she's kind of got some interest in doing like Russian. This will be the age of the Tsara. Remember, we've not had the revolution, so yeah, there's this picture here, very Cossack-y type sort of appearance. It's a great picture again. Yeah, very cool. I think even on the North Star Games website there's a shaman, so I don't think I'm breaking any rules by saying there's a shaman there. And then there's another option for captain. They have a line unit option in here as well, which is quite a useful one and very thematic for Russians, I will say, and will get you much bigger units. So if you want to field a lot of units, it's definitely a way to do it. A lot of models, should I say. Then we have some nice elites, and then we have another cannonade unit for them, which is very Russian themed as well. And then we have the special items. Very quickly, I will show you the special items. You can see the top one there. That's a preview. That's all I'm showing you. That's kind of the flavour of the items. They're more magical in nature, obviously. These ones. There are some non-magical upgrades, which generally seem to be for captains or lieutenants, and are quite cool. Especially the gun that's there. There's actually 2 guns there, but when you get the book you'll know. And then there are there's basically one faction upgrade each, and they're all quite grim but interesting. And then after that we're on to the scenarios. There are some option rules here as well. So just to show you the engagement scenario, which is the big one. This is a 25 point scenario, which seems to be the upper limit. Though technically you could do more, especially with some of the line choices some of the factions have got. But this is essentially your straight fight. And I would probably say that it's quite, because you're just using a straight fight on the table, you get half the size of this table if you're half the size of the points. This is pretty simple. Just an engagement. It's pretty good as far as just like a get on the board and start fighting. There are other scenarios, obviously. This is the trench raid one. As you can see, this is a much smaller area. It's a 4x4 area. And you'd have the trench on, you have the trench raid going on. We also have no man's land recovery. We also have defence. We also have the big push. And then we also have gas. That's a big one as well. And then we have our weapon reference charts at the back, which are going to be very useful, being that thankfully there's not a lot of rules on a weapons charts. It's quite clean to look at. And that is the end of the book. I was going to show you the templates. Those are the templates. Again, with a protractor and a pen, a ruler, you can basically make your own templates. That's just to show you the size they would be. And then there is the almost like Flamer-esque template there. So you can photocopy those for your own use. Boom! That was louder than I was expecting. So that is my first look at a War Transformed. It looks interesting. It's got some modelling potential in there that I'm really interested to try out. In the next video, I'm going to look at one of either the German or the British Empire and make a 10-point force for it. I'm going to start small and work my way up because I know I can make 10-point force with what I've got. So I'll be back with some models to use in that. I'll also be unboxing the Atlantic Wargames box set for whichever one I do. Again, I'm not decided. So, if you've enjoyed this video, thank you very much for staying to the end. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to see anything, put it in the comments. Have a great day, everybody. And hopefully again, I'll see you soon. Bye!